السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. Today we commence Surah An-Nisa, and this surah is one of the longer surahs in the Quran. It is the fourth surah in terms of the sequence of the Quran, but in terms of the sequence of revelation, it was revealed after Surah Al-Mumtahina. Surah Mumtahina was revealed after the Prophet ﷺ had decided to go into Mecca as a conqueror. So this surah was revealed after that, according to many Mufassirin. It has 176 verses. It is called Surah Nisa, meaning women, because it covers certain aspects of commandments pertaining to women that are not covered in any other surah. So there are two surahs, in fact, that are interchangeably called Surah An-Nisa. One is this one. It's called Surah An-Nisa Al-Kubra. And then there's another surah in the 28th juz called Surah Talaq. It is called Surah An-Nisa As-Sughra. So the greater Surah Nisa and the smaller Surah Nisa, that surah, as the name indicates, speaks in great detail about the ahkam of talaq. But this surah touches other aspects of ahkam pertaining to women, not just the contract of nikah or separation and so forth. It talks about other aspects. Now, it would appear that some of the verses in this surah were also revealed in Makkah. In other words, there were portions of this surah, verses that may have been revealed in Makkah before the Hijrah, and the majority of the surah being revealed after Hijrah. There's a great deal of emphasis in this surah on family life. So it sheds a great deal of light on relationships between husband and wife, and resolving disputes and conflicts, spousal conflicts, treatment of husband for the wife, and vice versa, and what people are supposed to do when they are called to help regulate or help fix an issue that has arisen between husband and wife. It also speaks in detail about the ahkam of jihad, and it also talks about the munafiqeen. So, the opening of the surah, Ya ayyuhan nasu taqu rabbakum, O people. And it is advising humanity in general, and Muslims specifically, to be aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala draws attention especially in respect to family relations. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ الَّذِي تَسَاءَلُونَ بِهِ وَالْأَرْحَامِ. Be very careful of these arham, of these family relations. So the surah opens up on this with this theme, that family relations are something that have to be observed. People have to be very careful about them. And then the surah goes into some of the ahkam pertaining to orphans. So these are for people that are entrusted with the wealth of orphans, or orphans are given under their care. They are sponsoring an orphan, or looking after an orphan, or becoming the custodian of an orphan, or the guardian of an orphan. So what kinds of things are they supposed to look out for? And how are they supposed to deal with money that these orphans may have inherited from their parents? So a great deal of care and caution, and specifics on when is a child ready to receive the wealth. So we know in conventional law, there are specific laws about when a person becomes entitled, at what age a person becomes entitled to access money that has been left for them in their name, or the estate that has been left for them. Islam also has a detailed set of commandments pertaining to that. The opening verses also talk about marriage. إن خفتم ألا تقسطوا في اليتامى فانكحوا ما طاب لكم من النساء مثنى وثلاث ورباع. The permissibility for men to marry more than one wife. And these ahkam take us up to verse number 14, where there are detailed instructions about how wealth is distributed after a person passes away. So these are what are called the fara'id. And these are those portions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has fixed. Faridatan min Allah. These are portions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has fixed, and those portions must be given. Even if a person doesn't want it, it must still be given to them, and then they can do whatever they want with it. From verse 15 to 31, some limits of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that must be observed. The limits of decency and chastity, abstaining from haram, abstaining from adultery and fornication. And they talk about some of the habits that people had in respect to women in the days of Jahiliyyah, how they used to mistreat them, how they used to take up all their money, even the money that they had spent on their wives or things that they had given to their wives, they would somehow manage to take them back, or things that were owed to the wife, such as the mahar, they would somehow find a way to usurp it, and mistreating them in general. For example, women were passed down in inheritance just like a person's wealth. So a person passes away, their estate is distributed amongst their heirs. Women, meaning their wives, would also be a part of that estate and distribute it to whoever she goes to, whoever she is given to. So sometimes it was possible that a man would inherit from his father, and along with the estate, he would also inherit his father's wife, who could in fact be his own mother or be his father's wife, and putting them in that situation where he becomes the owner or the master of his own father's bride. So these things are shunned, and these things are prohibited and forbidden. And then the Quran talks about those women that it is impermissible for one to marry. In other words, the mahrams, those women that are absolutely impermissible, the mothers, daughters, sisters, paternal aunts, maternal aunts, and those mothers or daughters that a person has a milk relationship with, and so on and so forth. The details of these are given. And further instructions about marriage, importance of paying the mahar, the importance of a man using his wealth in marriage. And that is a haqq that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to the women, and أَن تَبْتَغُوا بِأَمْوَالِكُمْ. So there is a financial aspect, there is a very important financial aspect in marriage, that a person must be ready or must have arrangements to look after this marriage financially. The impermissibility of taking each other's wealth through deception. In other words, making a trade or making a deal, a contract in such a way that the other person is deceived, or the other person doesn't have full disclosure of what they're getting, or using some device to trick the other person into a deal. Similarly, using haram means to acquire someone's wealth, such as stealing, or such as forcefully taking possession of their wealth, all of those illegal means. Allah says, "La ta'kulu amwanakum bainakum bil batil." Any impermissible way, any illegitimate way is shunned. Illa an takuna tijaratan an taradin minkum. If you are having dealings with one another, then it must be a trade that is conducted with mutual consent. Both parties are consenting to it, and both parties are aware of what they are getting into, what are the implications of this deal. Then from verse 32 to 42, there is an open discussion on the placement of men and the placement of women. We find that throughout history and even today, men are trying to find their place in society, their role in society. And women are also trying to find their role in society. What position do they have? And sometimes both are jockeying with one another for a specific position or a specific status. So the Quran openly talks about this and says, look, وَلَا تَتَمَنَّوْا مَا فَضَّلَ اللَّهُ بِهِ بَعْضَكُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ. There are some things in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made men superior, and there are some things in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made women superior. There are certain talents and skills that women have that men cannot compete with them in, and vice versa as well. So each should understand what their skill set is, being a male or being a female, and work with that skill set to play a certain role within the family setting and within society in general. It's not a matter of who is better or who is worse. Being better or worse in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to do with beliefs, character, and deeds. It doesn't have to do with one's gender. So that is a discussion that should be put aside. Who is superior? No one is superior based on their gender. A person can only gain superiority based on their nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So by merit of beliefs, character, and deeds, a person moves closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But each gender has a role to play in the world. Okay? Men cannot give birth to children. It's a fact. And women cannot carry the physical burden that men are naturally able to carry. So there is a division of a distribution of strengths and a distribution of skills that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made before even creating us. So we need to understand that and fit into it, and we will find that everything and every person will fall into their respective place. And in that is a lot of afiyah. There's ease for humanity. The trouble arises where one tries to play the role of the other, where women are trying to play the role of men, or men are trying to play the role of women. That is where there will be confusions, and there's going to be discomfort, and there's going to be problems for both genders. But in terms of the marriage setting, now somebody has to be given the decision-making power. Somebody has to be deemed the head. Yes, there is a partnership, definitely, as the Quran has described, that both have their own skill sets. So don't try to have what the other gender has gifted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But in terms of making the decisions in a family, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made men the head of the household. Why? Because there are certain leadership qualities that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to men. There are certain decision-making qualities Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to men. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them the physical ability to carry a great deal of burden, to carry the burden of the stress and the hardship that comes with earning and providing and managing all of these things. And the fact is that the marriage does not rest on the money that the woman brings. It rests on the money, the finances that the man provides. In other words, he is ultimately responsible for it. The woman is not ultimately responsible for it. There are cases where women are bringing some income, or they're working or earning, doing something. But the burden of providing the income and making the arrangements rests entirely on the man. So because of these responsibilities and because of the abilities Allah has given them, they are the ones that Allah has declared as qawwam, qawwamuna ala An-Nisa. So qawwam means a few things. One meaning of qawwam is that they're the caretakers. Caretakers mean they're the ones who are charged with looking after them. So they need to look after them. They need to look out for their interests. They need to protect them. Qawwam, it also means the one who is protecting and making sure that whatever is under his charge is safe. And it also means an overlooker. Overlooker is the one who looks over everything and ensures everything is in place. And that is only possible if they have the ultimate say in what happens or what doesn't happen in that family. Then there is a description of women. فَالصَّالِحَاتُ قَانِتَاتٌ حَافِظَاتٌ لِلْغَيْبِ بِمَا حَفِظَ اللَّهُ. But it doesn't mean that women are written off. There are women that have a great deal of nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because of their piety, because of their submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they are protective of the things Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them the trust of, guarding the husband's honor, for example, and looking after the household in the husband's absence, making sure that the trusts are not breached whether it's financial trusts, whether it's ethical and moral trusts. The woman is the one who is looking after that whole front and making sure that the household remains not just functional, but it also remains distinguished, honorable, and respectable. Verses 43 to 57. The prohibition of praying in a state of intoxication. I mentioned a couple of days ago that liquor, wine was prohibited gradually. So the first prohibition was that, well, there is some benefit, there is some harm, but the harm is greater, the sin is greater. Then came the prohibition of praying while in a state of intoxication, which is mentioned here in Surah An-Nisa. And then came the absolute prohibition, which is mentioned in Surah Ma'idah, the surah after this one. Some ahkam pertaining to wudu and the permissibility of making tayammum. When is tayammum permissible? And what are the necessities of tayammum? And then it moves on to a discussion of how the point is that these are rules and laws that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has legislated, and they will remain till Yawm al-Qiyamah. But there were people in the past who changed the legislations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one example that is given here is that of the Jews, how they changed. They changed things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had revealed. Now, there are two ways in which these changes were made. The Quran says, يُحَرِّفُونَ الْكَلِمَ عَمَّ مَوَاضِعِهِ. Two ways in which tahrif took place in the previous divine texts. One was a changing in the actual words. Actual words were changed, where things were added and things were removed. And people wrote things, filled things in on their own. فَوَيْلٌ لِلَّذِينَ يَكْتُبُونَ الْكِتَابَ بِأَيْدِيهِمْ. So an actual change in the body of the text. This is one type of change that happened. Another change is giving such an interpretation of the divine text, leaving the words as they are, but changing the meaning, the interpretation of the divine text to indicate something that is completely contrary to what the text intended. So you take a text, it might be general in its implication, and from it you start extracting rules, and you start making up your own rules. The text is not saying that, you have made it up yourself. So two types of tahrif took place with the previous books. Warnings to people to make sure that their faith, their iman is sound, it is correct before the day of judgment arrives, or before the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes. And there is some description of what happens to people in akhirah, people who leave this world without iman. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا بِآيَاتِنَا سَوْفَ نُصْلِيهِمْ نَارًا. Those who reject the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, referring specifically to those scholars of Ahlul Kitab who denied what Allah had actually revealed and rewrote things on their own. And generally speaking, to anyone who denies the verses of Allah, the signs of Allah, سَوْفَ نُصْلِيهِمْ نَارًا, we will enter them into a fire, and in that fire they will be roasted. كُلَّمَا نَضِجَتْ جُلُودُهُمْ بَدَّلْنَاهُمْ جُلُودًا غَيْرَهَا لِيَذُوقُوا الْعَذَابِ. So their skin is going to burn. And once skin burns, as you know, when all of the sensory capabilities, the nerve endings are burnt out and the skin cannot feel anything. So what will happen? Every time their skin is roasted, it will be replaced with a fresh layer of skin. بَدَّلْنَاهُمْ جُلُودًا غَيْرَهَا. A fresh layer of skin with new nerve endings and new sensory abilities. Why? لِيَذُوقُوا الْعَذَابِ. So they can continue to taste, to continue to feel the punishment. It's not just giving them the punishment, Allah wants them to feel the punishment. May Allah Ta'ala save us. And on the other side, in contrast, those who have iman, they do good deeds, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will enter them into Jannah, and there's some description of Jannah. After this, verses 58 to 70, the importance of obeying Allah and obeying Rasoolullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So Every place in the Quran where Allah commands us to obey Him, everywhere that Allah has said ati'u Allah, He has also said wa ati'u Rasul. Every place where the command to obey Allah is given in the Quran, the command to obey Rasulullah ﷺ is also given. There is not a single place where Allah has ordered us just obey Allah and has not followed it up with obey His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So success of an individual lies in both the importance of guarding and discharging trusts. A person is entrusted with anything, whether it's a sum of money, or something to look after, or it's a duty, it's a responsibility, it's a job, it's a secret. No matter what it is, when a person is entrusted with something, they need to make sure that that trust is discharged, because on the Day of Judgment, these trusts will be brought, and a person who breached those trusts, then the trust will testify against them. It will become a complainant against them, and this person will have to suffer because of that. Also, the importance of making fair decisions. كُونُوا قَوَّامِينَ بِالْقِسْطِ شُهَدَاءَ. Always be fair, honest, and just in your decisions and in your testimonies. In another place in the Quran, it mentions that even if your testimony goes against yourself or against your own people, you must make sure that you are upholding honesty. Upholding honesty, upholding justice, upholding fairness. There are many occasions in a person's life where a person has to make a call, and there are many occasions where it's your own interests are at stake, or the interest of someone that is close to you is at stake, and you are put in a position where you have to make either the right decision or a decision that looks out for this person's interest or your own interest. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala advises us that always make sure that your decision is fair, and you're not getting into this game of just looking out for yourself or looking out for other people. Upholding the truth is much more important in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Verses 71 to 87. The importance of taking the means, adopting the means of safety and security in a community and in a society. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu khudhu hidrakum. So khudhu hidrakum means take whatever is required for your protection. So it is important for a person to adopt the means of their own protection. In other words, do those things which will not endanger their lives or the lives of the people around them, and do those things which will protect their lives, wealth, and people, and the interests of the community. Make sure you are doing such things that keep you in a protected position. Don't expose yourself. A simple example, for example, not related to the verse, but an example of using a means of protecting yourself, as simple as using a seatbelt. It's a means of saving yourself. You have something within reach that could possibly save your life, and you know that there's a great danger to your life without it, so use it. Similarly, using things of precaution and not unnecessarily throwing yourself into the path of danger. So this is something that is applied at all levels. It's applied at the individual level, it's applied at the family level, it's applied at the community level, and it's applied at the global level. People that are in charge of the affairs of nations, what types of steps should they be taking, and what types of decisions should they be making, and what kinds of plans should they be making for their nation, for their people. So this is one of those important parts of any plan. That is your society, is your community or nation, is it secure? Or is it being exposed to dangers? You need to make sure that you're keeping them safe and protected. After that comes the idea or the concept of engaging in battle. Engaging in battle is something that it's it's something of an extreme. When conditions go out of control, then, okay, fine, you're being attacked, for example. Your interests are being attacked. Your allies are being attacked. Okay, you have to engage in battle. But it doesn't mean that you expose yourself so that anyone could come and attack you. So first is security and safety. After that is, the need to build your defense and the need to build your armed forces and things like that. And in the case of Islam, one of the most important, protecting your life is a responsibility. Protecting the lives of the people around you is also a responsibility. So jihad in Islam has many different implications. There is a jihad that is waged on religious bounds, meaning that the religion itself is under direct threat. The religion is being attacked, or people are being attacked because of that religion. And there's another concept where it's not a religious battle, it could be a political battle, but your people are under attack. So a person cannot say that no, jihad is only waged for religion, so we're not going to mobilize our armed forces for this. No, absolutely not. You have a right and you have a duty to protect your people and your property and your interests. So there are different types of jihad and there are different occasions when jihad is waged. However, there will always be people who come up with excuses not to participate, even when the cause is genuine. And when we talk about some of the surahs that go into a lot of detail of jihad, I'll open up the topic a little bit more. But in any case, over here, you have this class of people that show from outside that they are very supportive, but when the time comes to participate in an expedition, in an actual battle, they will always find some way to escape. They'll have an escape route prepared ahead of time. So the Quran warns us of these people. Don't rely on them, don't trust them, and beware of the trouble that they cause. Because when they go, they're not just going to disappear on their own, they're going to take many people with them. Like Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul did at the Battle of Uhud, where there were a whole bunch of people, over 1,000 Muslims were prepared to go, and they went in. But Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul, who pretended to be a Muslim but wasn't, he took 300 people away at the last minute. So these are some of the dangers of the munafiqeen. The Quran tells us to be very careful of such people. Verses 88 to 96. Another type of munafiq who professed Islam but didn't go where the Muslims were going. They would not migrate with the Muslims, they would not travel with the Muslims, they would not participate. So, فَمَا لَكُمْ فِي الْمُنَافِقِينَ فِئَتَيْنِ وَاللَّهُ أَرْكَسَهُمْ بِمَا كَسَبُوا. Very interesting. Why are you... Now the Muslims were divided over, okay, now these people are causing trouble. In fact, now they're coming in front of us in battle. But they had professed their Islam. So do we fight against them? Do we not fight? What do we do with them? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks, why are you divided into two groups over these munafiqeen? Wallahu arakasahum bima kasabu. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has pushed them back because of their own deeds. Now this theme is mentioned repeatedly in the Quran, where people are pulled back because of a mistake that they made. They made some error, they did something that displeased Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and because of that they were deprived from moving forward in deen, deprived from moving forward in the service of deen, deprived in moving forward in ibadah, deprived in moving forward in anything pertaining to Islam. They were pulled back. And in fact, in one place, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ تَوَلَّوْا مِنْكُمْ يَوْمَ الْجَمَعَانِ إِنَّمَا اسْتَزَلَّهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ بِبَعْضِ مَا كَسَبُوا. Even those people that were not able to make it in the battlefield, at the end of the day, tawfiq comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The ability to do anything good comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So why were these people left behind? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions two things. إِسْتَزَلَّهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ. Shaitan made them slip. That the act of shaitan is there. But it's not all the fault of shaitan. بِبَعْضِ مَا كَسَبُوا. It was because of their own previous mistakes. So it tells us a very important lesson. And the Quran repeats this, that sometimes our mistakes become barriers and obstacles for us in the future. They stop our progress. Our past mistakes could be hindering us today. That's why it's very important to make sincere tawbah from every major mistake. Min kulli dhanbin. Astaghfirullah al-azim. Min kulli dhanbin wa atubu ilayh. We seek the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from every single sin and mistake, because we don't know what mistake it could be that will not just get us doomed in akhirah, but what mistake have we committed that is stopping us from moving forward in our deen. Sometimes we don't feel the inclination to come to the masjid. Sometimes we don't feel the inclination to pray salat. Sometimes we find ourselves lazy even in respect to fasting. We find it difficult to do such and such good deed. The biggest obstacle in all of these cases is a sin or a mistake that we have committed in the past. And we will find that every time we make sincere tawbah and istighfar to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, doors for new good deeds will start opening up all of a sudden. So sit in seclusion and spill a few tears in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, beg Him for forgiveness, and all of a sudden you will find doors of good are opening up for you. It will happen every single time. And the more you do it, the more doors of khair will open. And the less frequently we do it, our own sins will become obstacles for us in sometimes even the most simple things. So when you can't understand why you're feeling lazy in deen, or why are you not able to participate in some work of deen as you would like to, go back to yourself and make istighfar. If there is something I have done that is holding me back. Verses 97 to 113. The result of those people who were supposed to participate in jihad, but they stayed behind. They were commanded to by Allah. They were commanded to by Rasoolullah, but their stubbornness was such that they just did not go. So what will happen to such people? The Quran explains. And in this passage, there's also mention of the importance of migrating from a place where a person cannot maintain their faith. If a person is living in an environment, in a society, or in a setting where it is no longer possible for them to maintain their faith, to maintain their religious practices, it becomes necessary for them to leave that place and go to a place where they can actually practice. So on the Day of Judgment, people who could have migrated but didn't, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will deem them to be zalim. So إِنَّ الَّذِينَ تَوَفَّاهُمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ ظَالِمِي أَنفُسِهِمْ. Now the angels will come and capture their souls, remove their souls from their bodies in a state that they are written as ظَالِمِي أَنفُسِهِمْ. These people have wronged themselves. They have done dhulm against themselves. The angels ask them, فِيمَ كُنْتُمْ? What's wrong with you? Why didn't you move from here? In other words, you stayed in this place until your own faith was compromised. What's wrong with you? He said, كُنَّا مُسْتَضْعَفِينَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. We didn't have the means. We were weak. We were considered weak in the world. We didn't have power. Some will say, oh, we didn't have the government. Some will say, we didn't have money. Some will say, we didn't have these resources. So the angel will ask them one simple question. أَلَمْ تَكُنْ أَرْضُ اللَّهِ وَاسِعَةً فَتُهَاجِرُوا فِيهَا. Wasn't the land of Allah very vast? Wasn't the earth that Allah created vast? It was so big and open, so many places in the world where you could have gone and lived and actually safeguarded your faith and the faith of your families. So what answer do you have for that? They will not have an answer. Of course, the earth is vast. So, a warning for those people who are not able to manage their deen. There are some people that can manage. They find that environment. They find all of those resources and people by which they can safeguard their deen. And they can live and they survive. But there are some people who go into an environment, they get overwhelmed. Or their children become overwhelmed. Their children start quite frankly, walking away from Islam. What are these people doing to correct that? So if they have this passive attitude, oh no, we're waiting for our citizenship, oh no, we're waiting for this, we're waiting for some money, we're waiting for this and that, none of these excuses will stick in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Verses 114 to 134. Secret discussions, secret conversations that people have. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, La khayra fi kathirin min najwahum. Most of the secret discussions that people hold have no khair in them. The secret gatherings, the secret meetings, most of them have no khair, illa man amara bi sadaqa, unless it is a confidential meeting held to do some charitable act. Let's get together and do something charitable. Let's get together and collect some money for such and such good cause. Or a person is gathering people secretly. Look, I want you guys to spend some money, you see, in this cause, in this cause, in this cause. Amara bi sadaqatin. Aw ma'rufin. There is a good deed that a person is trying to revive. And they're not making a big announcement about it. They're going to people individually and in confidentiality. They're saying, look, this is something that needs to be revived in the community. This is something that needs to be revived in our masjid. This is something that needs to be revived in society at large. أو إصلاح بين الناس. Or those confidential and secret gatherings that are held for the sake of rectifying the affairs, settling disputes, settling arguments. There are two people that are not talking to each other. There are two people that are at odds with one another. Okay, let's sit down in confidentiality and let's try to resolve this. Those secret gatherings are good. Aside from that, Allah says, there is no khair in most other gatherings. La khayra fi kathirin min najwahum. So this is important in the month of Ramadan, where we are supposed to take extra precautions in what we utter with our tongues, what we say with our tongues. Every comment counts in any season, but in the month of Ramadan, it becomes even more important. And talking about someone behind their back, saying something negative about someone behind their back in this month, it nullifies the reward of fasting. It erases it and deletes it completely. That hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where people were fasting and there were two women who said that we are unable to continue our fast. We're unable, we're getting too weak. It's like we're going to die. So the Prophet ﷺ told the messenger that tell them both to vomit in bowls and then come and tell me. So they both induced vomiting. And from inside came blood and raw meat. And these bowls were filled with blood and raw meat. And everyone was shocked. Where all this blood come from? And where did all this raw meat come from? The Prophet ﷺ was informed and he said, yes, their bellies fasted from food, but their tongues did not fast from the reputations and from the honor of people. Even in the state of fasting, they were backbiting about people. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed that this is what because backbiting someone has been compared to eating the flesh of your dead brother. أَن يَأْكُلَ لَحْمَ أَخِيهِ مَيْتًا. Why dead brother? Why not while he's alive? Because he's not there to defend himself. You can go up to a dead body and do whatever you want. It cannot defend itself. It's dead. Similarly, this person is not there to defend themselves, to stand up for themselves. And you are taking advantage of that. It's just as lowly and it's just as despicable as going up to a dead body and starting to bite pieces out of it. Verses 135 to 147. Again, the importance of justice and fairness, the importance of giving fair testimony and accurate testimony, and again some discussions on the munafiqeen. Verses 148 to 162. This is now the beginning of the 6th juz. لا يحب الله الجهر بالسوء من القول إلا من ظلم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not like people announcing bad things. Bad things should not be announced, they should not be shared, they should not be broadcasted. The only time a person should speak openly about wrong is man zulim, if someone has been wronged, they have been deprived of a right, somebody has been robbed, somebody has been tricked, somebody's wealth has been snatched away, somebody has been beaten or hurt, then for that person to claim what is owed to them, what is payable to them, there is no harm in speaking about it. But aside from that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, la yuhibbullahu al-jahra bis-su'. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not like open discussions about evil, about wrong things. Amazing. In an era where news media highlights every single event and brings it to the attention of people. And one of the greatest harms of that is people who had no idea that such a crime could be committed also start thinking about that crime, that, oh, this is also a way to commit a crime. So the way to remove evil from society is not to start talking about evil. Who did evil? How did they do it? When did they do it? Having open discussions on that. No. The way to remove it is to talk about the good that needs to be implemented. And then there is discussion of how people, the Ahlul Kitab, they had this policy of picking and choosing prophets. يَقُولُونَ نُؤْمِنُ بِبَعْضٍ وَنَكْفُرُ بِبَعْضٍ. They say, look, some of these prophets we believe in, and others we don't want to believe in. So Allah says, أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْكَافِرُونَ حَقًّا. They are true disbelievers. Why? Because if you reject one prophet, you've rejected all of them. You reject one prophet of Allah, you've rejected all of them, because all the prophets came with the same message, and all the prophets were affirming what the other prophets were saying. So a person who rejects, for example, who says, I don't believe in Jesus, I don't believe in Isa alayhi salam. This person is a kafir. Even according to Muslims, they're a kafir. Person says, I don't believe in Musa alayhi salam. So this is what these people had done. The Jews said, no, we don't believe in Jesus. These are the prophets. We believe in Abraham, we believe in Yaqub, we believe in this, and that's it. The rest we're not interested in. And the Christians did similar things. So the true believers are those who adopt all the Anbiya alayhimu salatu wassalam. Now, some of the big errors made by the Jews, they're actually counted one after the other. There's a whole bunch of them. Slandering Maryam radiallahu anha, trying to kill Isa alayhi salam, and then claiming to have killed him. Eating haram and taking interest and usury. And then when they were reminded, they would say, no, our hearts are enveloped, your message does not come through. وَقَوْلِهِمْ قُلُوبُنَا غُلْفٌ. And all of the mistakes, the major mistakes that they made, the rejection of the prophets, the killing of the prophets ﷺ en masse, these were the reasons why they were cursed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and why they were doomed. And on the other side, the believers, the signs of the believers, what they should do. 163 to 176 again emphasizes the importance of believing in all the prophets alayhimu salatu wassalam. And there's a passage dedicated to explaining to the Christians that they should not go to extremes, that they have gone to extremes in their religion. They have taken Isa alayhi salam, who was a miracle of Allah, who was a prophet of Allah, but he was a slave of Allah. They took him and elevated him to the Son of God. And they attributed things that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to Isa alayhi salatu wassalam. So there is a detailed discussion on some of their mistakes, how their beliefs are wrong, and how they need to come back to the correct belief. And the surah had started with some discussion on mirath, on distribution of estate, and it ends also with the ahkam of mirath for a person who does not have any ascendants or descendants. How is their wealth to be distributed? And with that, we conclude the summary of Surah An-Nisa. And tomorrow, inshallah, we start Surah Al-Ma'idah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq to take from this guidance, to build a stronger connection with the Quran. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us to devote more of our attention to the Quran in these coming days. Subhanallah wa bihamdi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun, wa salamun ala al-mursaleen, walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.